All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to go ahead and introduce myself here. I'm Mike. I'll be the little instructor for the next hour. And just want to say that we're very happy that you can join us here today. I'm part of the Eloqua team, been with the Eloqua team for close to a decade now, and instructor in general for over 12 years. But today we are here to talk about the difference between WCAG 1.1, 2.1, I apologize, and 2.2 as well. We're going to have a bit of time at the end here to answer some of the questions you guys might have as well. And Craig might be coming on a little bit later to kind of wrap things up as well. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and really just jump in there here. And I want to talk about really where WCAG is at this point in time, right? Because WCAG 2.0 has been around for a long time now, over 14 years, right? Or going on 14 years in just a few weeks. So it's been around for a long time, and we've been trying to make content as accessible as possible for the web. And there's change on the horizon, right? WCAG 2.1 became a W3C recommendation back in 2018, and even WCAG 2.2 is currently in draft. And the last iteration of the draft was actually just, a few weeks ago, right? So we're talking about October 2022. Now, I'm going to be talking about these different criteria that were introduced in WCAG 2.1 and some criteria that are currently in the draft for 2.2. It is important to understand the difference between the two because depending on who you are, where you're working, if you're in Canada, you're in the United States, you're in Europe, you're in Australia, the legislations might be different for you. So if your legislations, for example, make it mandatory that you meet WCAG 2.1, then the 2.2 criteria might not be something that you need to worry about right now. However, again, this is unclear depending on where you are, what the legislations are going to be. But it is just a matter of time before 2.0 is no longer the norm. The norm would be 2.1 or 2.2, depending on your department, depending on your organization that you're working for. So when I go through the different criteria here this afternoon, you will notice that some of them say 2.2 and the other ones do not say 2.2. So the 2.1 criteria don't have any markings and the 2.2 criteria do. Again, it's really hard to say at this time, depending on legislations and all these different rules that people are making, what criteria you will have to meet. So I'd rather talk about both of them so that way you know what's on the horizon. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and jump in there. I'm going to get started here and start talking about the new criteria in WCAG 2.1 and currently the 2.2 draft criteria as well. Now we do have some examples for these as well, so let's jump in there. So for criteria 1, 3, 4, it is a new criteria for WCAG 2.1, and it is, well, it's pretty simple. As a developer, you cannot force a user to use their mobile device in landscape or portrait. They have the ability to use the specific orientation that they want. So if they want to view their content in landscape, they can view it in landscape. If they want to see it in vertical or horizontal, it really doesn't matter which one. They can pick from whichever one they want. Now, as a developer, what do you have to do? It's pretty simple. Just don't get in the way. It's actually a little bit more work to actually block that from happening. So if the user wants to view their content in landscape mode, they're allowed to, and vice versa. So it's a pretty simple one. Honestly, pretty much everybody's meeting this at this point in time, unless you're adding code to actually restrict that behavior. It is a default behavior for browsers. Now for the next one, 135, identify input purpose. I don't know about you guys, but I definitely love to be able to use the autofill feature inside browsers. So when there's a form with my first name and my last name and my email address, I don't want to have to actually put all of those in every single time. So I love the ability to actually allow myself to use the autocomplete feature using the browser features that were introduced years ago. Well, as a developer, what you have to do is make sure that you actually code your backend correctly so that it allows the autocomplete to happen when you're actually filling out a form. So we do have a little example for this one, pretty simple here. if we actually just go to one of our pages, we have a form available on the right side. Well, I have first name, last name, email, organization. I filled out these before. And if I name these specific boxes the appropriate name, then behind the scenes, okay, the browser will recognize these form fields, understand what is required for them to be filled out. And if I go ahead and just use the autofill, you can see everything is automatically filled in. Again, this is a new criteria in, again, WCAG 2.1, okay? So if you're thinking about security and things like that, an end user can still turn that off, right? You are letting the end user decide if they want to use this feature. As a content provider, developer, you are allowing the users that do want to use this feature to be able to use that feature. So again, new criteria in WCAG 2.1. Now, if we go to 1.4.10, you should already be doing this because it's just good design, but really basically requires responsive design. The reflow, you want to make sure that your website is responsive. It works on a mobile device, on a tablet, and on a computer. In 2022, that's the web standard, but it goes a little bit further than this, right? Because what you want to make sure you also do is that when you are on a mobile device, the viewport is mainly horizontal scrolling. You have very little to no horizontal scrolling. It's all vertical. So you're scrolling up and down, up and down. So if we take a look at a couple different examples of this, if we go on this very old website right here, and I were to go to a mobile view, okay, let's just simulate a mobile view right here. You can see that it's not responsive. I have horizontal scrolling going back and forth like this. And you're like, yeah, well, our website doesn't do that. You're probably right. Your website probably doesn't do that. But you'll still see some responsive websites that do not handle everything correctly. So I have, again, another example for this. If we go to this site that looks like it's working, you know, it's not great, but you know, it's responsive in some ways. Sure, it looks like it's responsive, but it's not responsive in the right way, because if I actually go to a very mobile screen here, you'll notice I have horizontal scrolling available to me, and I have all this white space, this dead space. That's just bad design in general. But we do see this quite often in 2022 because, well, if I scroll down, you're going to notice that something's pushing everything towards the left, right? So I have a very big table here that is allowing me to horizontal scroll pretty much everything on this page. Now, obviously, tables are quite large sometimes, so having the ability to, you know, squish them into a mobile screen is not really possible. So that's where, again, things like carousels, even though you should avoid carousels, and tables would be an exception to this reflow rule. If I scroll down, I want to make this table horizontal scroll, but not the rest of the content horizontal scroll, which is of course something that you want to code correctly behind the scenes depending on your framework. Now the framework I'm using here is Bootstrap, but again, that's irrelevant. I'm just going to go ahead and fix it by adding a quick little class around the table responsive, save it. And now if I refresh that page once more, you're going to notice that at the top of the page, there is no longer any horizontal scrolling. I don't have this dead space of white everywhere. If I scroll towards the bottom, however, that table is still available to me in all its glory, okay? I can scroll to the right, scroll to the left, and that's fine. So your website should mainly be vertical scrolling when you get to a mobile view. And then again, on a desktop, adapt to different screen size. So again, that's a bit of an example of 1.4.10, which is reflow. Now, 1.4.11, non-text color contrast. This is, again, more color contrast rules. And it typically means that anything that the user can interact with, that element has a focusable hover state, active state, of at least 3:1 color contrast ratio. If we go take a look at Elico's websites, for example, just for a second here, and I tab through, okay, you're going to notice that this focusable element right here, okay, has, I'll just actually go on this one here a little bit easier. In this situation here, it has 3 different borders here. Now, again, you don't need to have 3, again, but what you want to do is you at least have one of these that is 3-to-1 color contrast ratio between the foreground and the background. That means if the background is light, then you have the darker colors that come in that are 3-to-1 ratio. And if the background is light, then again, you have, well, vice versa. So no matter what, you have high color contrast, because what you don't want to end up with is, again, we have an example of what not to do here. If I tab through here, you're going to notice that, you know, gray box is showing me where I'm focusing. There's my focus, right? However, this is not 3-to-1 ratio. It doesn't meet this new criteria. The color contrast for this focusable element is too low. Now, this is, of course, something you can change in the CSS. We have outlines, we have borders that we can do to create this focusable element. Now, luckily, it's not as strict as, let's say, smaller font, which is 4.5-to-1 ratio. So 3-to-1 ratio is a little bit more, you know, it's easier to accomplish. We really want to make sure that people always know where they're at, no matter where they are on the screen when they're using their keyboard to navigate. Again, somebody that's using a keyboard is not necessarily visually impaired. They could be potentially just using a keyboard because they're a pro user. Maybe they're using a keyboard because they can't use a physical mouse. So again, there's lots of reasons why they might be navigating a keyboard without using a screen reader. So again, you want to make sure that these users actually know where they're at all times. And having nice, clear, focusable elements is also very important. So again, focus, hover, active, anything that the user can really interact with, it is clear when it is selected. The next one is a little bit more on the technical side, but what you want to try to avoid is making it hard to read content, right? Again, let's go take a look at this beautiful paragraph right here. We're exaggerating a little bit here in this case, but you can see here deep in the foothills, that's pretty condensed, right? Content is pretty condensed. It makes it really hard to read. Looks terrible as well, but again, now in this case, would not be WCAG 2.1 compliant. So you'll notice that we have these new rules, these new criteria for text spacing. Okay, we typically want the line height to be at least 1.5 times the font size. We want the spacing following paragraphs, so in between paragraphs, to be at least 2 times the font size. That's a pretty good standard nowadays anyways, but again, now we have this rule that we need to follow. Letter spacing, again, tracking to at least 0.12 times the font size, and word spacing to at least 0.16 times the font size. So at the end of the day, you're trying to create nice, breathable characters that are easy to read, easier on the eyes, and we want to make sure that everything is pretty much readable, right? Next is 1.4.13, content on hover and focus. We want to make sure that anything the user can interact with, they can remove it from the screen without having to refresh the screen. Anything that the user can potentially pop open, we need to be able to dismiss it as well. This can occur whenever we are on a mobile device, a smaller screen, and some sort of tooltip, some sort of pop-up shows up, and as a mobile user, we can no longer dismiss it. Now, you're going to notice that accessibility has a lot of new criteria in WCAG 2.1 and 2.2 to create a better user experience for mobile users. That really shows that accessibility is for everyone, right? Everyone benefits from an accessible environment. And really, this is just good user experience for all users, including mobile users. So if we go take a look at an example for this one, I'm going to scroll down a little bit here, and you're going to notice that we have 3 different ways to create a tooltip here in this situation. We have a dismissible popover where I can click on it and then click absolutely anywhere else to get rid of it. We have a second button that says click to toggle the popover. And to get rid of it, I need to actually click on it again. So to dismiss this second popover, I need to actually click on the same button a second time. I go ahead and click anywhere else and it doesn't get rid of it, right? And then the last one is the same thing, but in a different location. So if I click on first name, you can see here, I can actually dismiss it right here by clicking on it again. 3 different buttons. However, one is different than the others for when I go to a mobile view. If I actually make the screen smaller once more, and zoom out a little bit here to 100%, we're at 100% right now. The first one, I click on it, I can technically dismiss it by clicking anywhere else. The last one, I can click on it, and again, I can dismiss it because the button is still available to me. But you probably can guess the second one here, okay, the middle one, is problematic. When I click on it, as you're going to see, the way to actually get rid of this tooltip is by clicking the button again. But the button is hidden behind the tooltip itself. So I can't actually dismiss it. There's no way for me to get rid of it. And again, that is, yes, bad design, but in this case now as well, not accessible. So that's an example of 1.4.13. There's other situations, of course, but at least one example. Next one, 2.1.4, character key shortcuts. Well, the fact that we need a criteria for this is a little silly, but some people were doing this. So we need to make sure that no one actually uses non-printable, printable keys for shortcuts. So if I go to the website and all of a sudden I want to write my name Mike, right? I want to write Mike, but when I press M, instead of writing the letter M, it actually triggers an action on the page. It runs a shortcut. It runs some sort of action on the page. It activates some sort of component on the page. Well, at that point, I can't actually write my name, right? If there's a website, for example, like this one, I'm going to go back to the home screen for this example here, and I want to write M somewhere on the page, doesn't matter where it is, but when I press M, it triggers an action. So in this case, the M key was pressed, but it could have been something else that happened. Maybe it triggered a link or went to a new page. So in this case, it just puts M key was pressed, but I can never actually write my name because the M key is triggering this action instead. Common sense, I know for that one. It's just good design, really. But yeah, we don't want to rely on printable characters. If you want a shortcut, to create a shortcut, add the control key, add the alt key. You know, if you're on a Mac, add the command key, but the printable keys alone is not good enough. So if a keyboard shortcut uses printable character keys, then the user must be able to disable the key command, define the key to non-printable key, like Control, Alt, okay? So you want to allow the users to actually be able to complete their task, for, in this case, write their names without triggering an action. Now, the first 2.2 criteria that I want to touch on here today, meaning if your company says, oh, we're making 2.1 mandatory, not 2.2, then again, this is a 2.2 criteria, just making sure that that's nice and clear. For 2.4.11, which is a draft, focus appearance, when the keyboard focus indicator is visible, it's clearly visible by being thick enough and by having good color contrast. So it goes back to the non-text color contrast here and kind of pushes it up a notch, right? Whenever the user actually taps through the page, the color contrast is thick enough, but the size of the element border, the border that you visually saw earlier, needs to be also thick enough, okay? So if I go back here, it's hard to see at some point. And you're really gonna notice it whenever you get to like form fields, right? So nice and thick. And then if I go to the form field on the right side, it gets pretty hard to tell, okay, around that form field that that's where I am. So again, we want to make sure that this border is thick enough, visible enough, at least a minimum of 1 pixel, of course, to be able to tell where we're at. Next up, we have 2.4.12 focus not obscured. This is again WCAG 2.2, bit of a more of a clarification, but when a user interface component receives keyboard focus, the component is not entirely hidden due to author created content. So if you have a dynamic form, for example, and the element, let's say there's a form field that gets bigger and bigger as the users write content, and the next component that's focusable is then behind that form field, that would be problematic, obviously. So again, more of a clarification one, because you shouldn't have been doing that from the get-go, right? 2.5.1 pointer gestures requires an author to ensure the users can perform touch function with assistive technologies or one single finger. Think about a map. How do you guys zoom in on a map? Well, on a mobile device, you're probably zooming in on a map with 2 fingers. You're using your thumb and your index and then pinching in and pinching out to zoom in and zoom out. Well, we want to allow assistive technologies to zoom in and zoom out, maybe via keyboard, maybe via speech. But we also want to be able to let users with 1 finger be able to zoom in and zoom out. So if we take a look at a map, on the bottom right corner, we want to offer the ability to click the zoom in and click the zoom out. We have the ability to complete the same task with a barrier-free environment with just 1 finger, not 2. Yes, I can pinch in. Yes, I can pinch out. But I also need to be able to zoom in with the plus and zoom out with the minus. Alternative method for the user to complete the same task. Am I removing the feature for zoom in and zoom out with the pinch? No, we are offering an alternative method for the user to complete the same task, just in a different way. Next up here, we have 2.5.7, dragging movement, which again, in this case is WCAG 2.2. All functionality that uses the dragging movement for operation can be achieved by a single pointer without dragging, unless dragging is essential or functionality determined by the user agent and not modified by author. So again, in this case, whenever we have a dragging drop kind of mechanism in place, think of your emails, right? You want to be able to grab that email, drag it to a folder. Well, we need an alternative method for the user to do the same thing, right? So using a drop-down menu, for example, move to a specific folder, and the user can complete the same task, again, here in this case, as an alternative method. 2.5.2 is a WCAG 2.1 criteria, pointer cancellation. Now, by default, every link and button in the HTML world has the ability to be canceled by moving away from it and then letting go. What do I mean by that? Well, if you actually go to any website, you click on a link, move away, and then let go, you'll notice it actually doesn't actually go to that link. It cancels it. This allows us as end users to say, oh, I actually didn't want to go to that link. I didn't actually want to press that button. I move away, let go, and cancels. We want to make sure that that feature is still available. We want to make sure that we don't remove that ability, that cancellation, because maybe we clicked on the wrong button. This is also very good for mobile users because we've, probably clicked on the wrong button before, but also it's just think about your scroll. When you're scrolling on a mobile, you're touching the screen and scrolling down, touching the screen and scrolling down. And if these were all on clicks, you might be actually clicking on links constantly instead of scrolling, which obviously would be problematic. Okay. So on the right side here, we have a button that's pretty typical. If I click on it, move away, cancels it. This one, I click on it, move away, cancels it. But this one, Bruce Terrence, if I click on it and it goes away, I go away, it's actually not allowing me to cancel it. It actually triggers right away. That's because we have some JavaScript behind the scenes that's making it obviously activate on mouse down, which is what you don't want to use. If you ever write JavaScript, you're pretty much, you don't want to use on mouse down. On click is fine, on blur is fine, but on mouse down is something you want to avoid. So again, you're allowing the users to cancel their actions. 253 labels and names. Whatever a user visually sees is what, for example, a screen reader will announce to a screen reader user. So here we have a submit button, which in this case I would recreate using HTML and CSS, but in this situation it's an image, okay? Which, yes, I could potentially say that this fails 145, which is text as an image, but I digress. This is a button that says the word submit as an image. The screen reader needs to read out loud the word submit. It is matching what the visual users can see. So again, the label name, an interface component, link, button, doesn't matter, presents the text or image of the text, the accessible name. So if you're using a label, if you're using alternative text, ARIA, when you really, really need to, that's what gets read out loud for same thing as the visual users. 2, 5, 4 is motion actuation. So this means that anything, let's say you have a mobile device and you shake your phone. Well, a lot of times that actually can trigger things, right? For example, if you're inside your mobile messaging app, the native iOS app, for example, when you shake your screen, it's like the undo button, right? In some email clients, when you shake your screen, it undoes your deletion of an email. In other application, for example, sports apps, if you shake the screen, it hides the score. You shake the screen, it shows the score. You need an alternative method for the users to complete the same task. Okay, you can't ask a user to wave in front of their camera. There needs to be an alternative method for the users to complete the same task. So an undo button, for example, right? A hide the score button. The ability to pretty much do the same thing as a user that is shaking their screens. You can't force a user to shake their phones, obviously. So again, just another little example there. Next up, 2.5.5, okay, target size. Now this is where in WCAG 2.1, this was a AAA criteria, but the target size was 48 by 48 pixels. In the latest draft of WCAG 2.2, the target size is now a AA criteria. However, the target size has been reduced to 24 by 24 pixels. This is one that I kind of wish it would stay at 48 by 48, but again, it's better than nothing. But what it means is anything that's interactive, the user can interact with, has a minimum size of 24 by 24 pixels. I know I've clicked on the wrong link before on a mobile website because the two links were so close to each other and had very small clickable areas. So you end up clicking on the wrong thing. Now imagine having hand tremors on top of that. That could be very problematic. So you're allowing a user more areas to click on anything the user can interact with, both on desktop and mobile. But this is really showing you that we are trying to create a better user experience, make it easier for people to interact with our applications, our websites. Three, 2, 6, consistent help. You want consistency throughout, right? Well, nothing new here. If a web page contains any of the following help mechanism, and those mechanisms are repeated on multiple web pages within the set of web pages, they occur in the same relative order. Now, again, that means if we go from a desktop view to a mobile view to a tablet view, it needs to be, again, consistent where we can find the help. You can't have the help at the top right on a desktop, and then on a mobile, it's all the way at the bottom. You want consistency between screen sizes as well. So no matter, again, what size we have, reviewing the content, there's similar location to find the help. 3.3.7, accessible authentication. Again, another WCAG 2.2. So all three in this case are 2.2 here. Supports for password entry by password managers, like 1Password, for example, like iPassword for iPhone. So that way it reduces memory need, right? We don't have to try to remember a password. So you don't want to block that. I know for a fact that some banking out there do block that mechanism. They say it's a security issue, so they don't allow the password to actually autofill automatically using password managers. Other things that I've seen being removed is the copy paste. People are removing the copy paste to and another point, you have to remember and rewrite everything. So copy paste to reduce the cognitive burden to retype everything. Now, there's exceptions to this rule. For example, if you want to make sure that the user puts in their password, let's say they are creating a password, you want to make sure that they enter it correctly, then you force them to put that password a second time. That would be an exception to the rule. If you want them to confirm their email a second time, potentially an exception to the rule. But at the end of the day, you want to allow user to copy and paste so that it's easier for them to fill out the form, less cognitive burdens, and again, in my personal opinion, a better user experience. Next, 3.3.9, redundant entry, right? So WCAG 2.2, again, information previously entered by or provided to the user that is required to be entered again in the same process is either auto-populated or available to the user to select. I'm sure we've all filled out a form, and then on the second page, it's asking us for the same information again. Well, instead of having to fill it out all over again, there's a auto-populate that just does it for us, or a mechanism in place to say same as previous, right? Copy from previous. So think of your, when you're buying something online, you have your billing address, then you have your shipping address. If it's the same, there's a mechanism in place to say, grab all that information, populate it automatically for me. And then 413, status message. Whenever there's dynamic content that appears on the screen, we want to make sure that the user is aware of it. There's a lot of different mechanisms in place to make this happen. And we want to make sure everyone has access to that information that dynamically appears on the screen, including screen reader users. However, I see often for form validation, that is not the case. When a user completes a specific task, visual users know, but a screen reader user has no idea. There's no audio cue. Again, a little example for this one. Let's go to whiteboard for this. Scroll back up. So we have a button. If I play the lotto, I get to win the lottery. That's pretty good, right? You get to go to Bora Bora. However, if I'm a screen reader user, in this case, I'm going to turn on voiceover here.
Voiceover on Chrome. Heading level 2. Content change. Heading level play lotto button.
So I'm on the play lotto. I can hear the screen reader read content out loud. I navigated quickly using my heading shortcut key. I'm ready to play the lotto. However, when I press return, nothing happens. even though I did win the lottery, I have no way of knowing. There's no audio cue. There's nothing being said that I did win the lottery. So in this case, the user is left without that information. I have no idea.
Voiceover off.
I do a small change. Now there's a lot of different ways, again, you can go about doing this. I actually would prefer using a JavaScript focus in this case rather than ARIA alert. However, ARIA live equals polite will work in this case. So little attribute, little value, save and refresh this page. Make sure it's uploaded successfully here. Do the same exercise a second time.
Voiceover on Chrome. Heading level 2. Play Lotto. Button.
3, 2, 1.
Congrats. You won the lottery.
And as you can hear in this situation, we now have that feedback, okay? The users now has that information that they won the lottery. So they can celebrate, just like the visual users.
Voiceover off.
We see a lot of fails for that one for forms, form validation. But it could be for anything that dynamically appears on the screen, okay? So these new criterias, of course, will be mandatory at one point in the future for WCAG 2.1. Okay, for the WCAG 2.2, again, they're still in draft, so they might still be tweaked, they might still be changed. So you want to keep an eye out for the documentation that's available online, right? So if we take a look, well, we have and beautiful page that I'm going to share in the chat here in case. And okay, I'll ask Jody to share that with everyone a little bit later. But in this case, what's new in the working draft? You can always go take a look at the changes that they've made. Again, the last one was in October. It's still not mandatory or recommended by the W3C to use WCAG 2.2. It's going to be interesting to see where it goes. There's even, for example, talk of WCAG 3.0, but that will not only be for web, right? It's going to be bigger than just the web. But in this case, again, the documentation for WCAG 2.2 is available online. Also, WCAG 2.1 is a recommended option for all of you to follow as of today, right? And that's been true since 2018. Again, the criteria themselves can be viewed here on the left side, and it's available for all of you to visit, right? w3.org/tr/WCAG21. If you ever want to go see WCAG 2.0, just remove the 1, put a 0 in there, and you have our old beautiful guideline. Keep an eye out, okay? So we also have examples of what not to do on this site here. For example, we looked at quite a few of them. Any questions regarding these criteria? So WCAG 2.1, 2.2. So it's just a quick overview, right? A quick overview about the new criteria. Hopefully gets you a better idea of what is new, what is coming in the future, what's coming up next. Now, I believe Craig wants to say a few words as well.
Yes, you can hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Hey, well, yeah, thank you so much, Mike. And thank you to everyone who attended today. Really appreciate you taking some time out of your day on a Monday to join us, and we certainly hope that this was helpful. Like if while I'm talking here and trying to wrap this up for you guys so you can get back to your love of your work, I just wanted to let you know that if you do have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand in the interface, in the GoToWebinar interface while I'm talking here. Otherwise, if there are no questions, I would like to present another idea for a little while later. I think it'd be really interesting to, as you know, hopefully you're going to go back to work and you're going to, take a look at the W3C website and think about how you're going to integrate 2.2 down the road or very soon. And we'd love to take an opportunity to give you a hand and answer any questions that might come up when you're going through that process of thinking this through, or even doing some of the implementation. So I think what I'd like to do here perhaps in January is set up another session, just another hour at some point, and just give everyone the opportunity to come up with some questions, submit them to us in advance, and then an invitation will be sent out to everybody to attend this Q&A session. And Mike will go through the submitted questions and address them. And hopefully it'll give everyone an opportunity to feed off of, one another's questions and his responses, just to give you a little more support in getting your implementation in place. So details on that to come. Like I said, I think we'd probably do this in January once you've had some time to think about it. Otherwise, yeah, Mike, thank you once again. Love the way that you're presenting the ideas and giving examples and helping us get a clear understanding of what's to come, and how it's going to affect users across the board. And again, if there's no one else with any questions, we can certainly wrap it up. Anyone, let us know. If not, we really do appreciate you taking the time out to spend some time with us this afternoon. Mike, I'll leave it there to you to close off.
All right, very good. Thanks, Craig. So I really appreciate you guys listening. Again, we hopefully gave you a few different examples here that can help you understand some of these more technical criterias. At the end of the day, we just want to make sure that everybody has access to the same information. Everybody has a barrier-free environment, and at the same time, when you're actually creating a more accessible environment, you're actually creating a better user experience most of the time. There's always exceptions to every rule, right? But most of the time, you're actually creating a better user experience for all your end users, which is really what we want to try to aim for, right? So thanks again, and hopefully we can hear you guys in the future. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining us here today. Have a wonderful afternoon.